All right. Hello, everyone. This is James Jackson III, founder of the Utah Black Chamber, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Understanding Your Funding Options. Joined with us today is the, Doug, are you the Executive Director or CEO?
They keep adding titles to me, James. So now I'm President and CEO and Executive Director. So,
all right, look at that. You're all three.
Yes, right. I hit the trifecta.
You got the trifecta. So President, Executive Director, and CEO of the Utah Microloan Fund. And also joining us is Jackie Hobson, Marketing and Outreach Specialist for the SBA Small Business Administration Utah District Office. And what we're gathered here today to share with you is just some traditional and non-traditional funding options for small businesses, where you can find opportunities to grow your business through some lending opportunities that you can get through a bank and not through a bank. And so without further ado, what I'd like to do is start with Jackie Hobson, who shares some of her information, and then we'll turn it over to Doug. And then after that, we'll just open it up for Q&A. So Jackie and Doug, thank you so much for joining us. And at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Jackie.
Awesome, thanks so much. I'm going to share my screen. When I do that, it goes kind of funky. So if there's a chat option or for questions, do you want to shout those out to me, James, as we go?
Yes, we do have a chat and a Q&A function. So for any questions, you'll see the Q&A at the bottom there. So just click on Q&A and I will monitor those questions for you.
Great, thank you. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
You're ready to go.
Okay, awesome. So I am with the SBA. I've been with the SBA for a little over a year, but not new to entrepreneurship. So after I left the military, just giving you a little background, so you're like, hey, she might know what she's talking about. After I got done with the military, I actually ran multiple businesses that were my own. And then I went and got an MBA and started working with the Small Business Development Center. Also did some stuff for the Veterans Business Resource Center, and now I'm on the SBA side. So I don't get to interact as much with business owners as I did in the past when I was more in a business mentoring or business counseling mode. Now I usually get to work with partners like James and the Black Chamber, our lending partners like Doug, or Women's Business Center, Small Business Development Center, things like that. So I always like when I get to come and actually talk to a few business owners. I will start, let's see. I'm going to start with a video. Let's see if this is clicking. Mainly because the question we get asked most is, hey, where's the grant money, or is there grant money? So I like to throw it out right away. The SBA does not have a tree that grows money that they can give out to anyone. I wish that we did. A lot of times, just to kind of clarify that, sometimes there's grant money that comes out through the SBA, and a lot of that usually goes to different organizations that will then help businesses get up and going or with different opportunities. So there are some grant opportunities like SBIR grants and things like that, the STEP grant that will go directly for business owners. But in most cases, those go to organizations that are going to help you out. So I like to clarify that right from the get-go. But this little video I thought was kind of a fun representation and kind of gives you a good outline of, kind of how money finds their way in the hands of entrepreneurs.
Most young companies need money, which may or may not come as a big surprise, but they do. The number one source they get money from is from their own savings. Whether it's a few $100s or even thousands of dollars, that's what we tend to tap first. And a lot of companies don't get money from any other place. They get money from their own savings, and then after that, they're lucky enough to be cash flow positive. They're profitable. So we talk a lot as if all companies require all sorts of external capital, and the reality is that more than half of young companies get all their funding from a combination of founder savings and then cash flow from the business, and we're out of here. Next up on the list is another one that catches, I think, people by surprise, and that's credit cards. Almost every young company you can think of, to one degree or another, was funded on credit card. And it is the single largest source of capital for young companies after founder savings. And then the next place where they tend to get money is from friends and family. After I've tapped out my credit card and I've used up all my savings, I turn to people I know and say, hey, will you help me? And that's the third biggest source of capital. And then the next place is banks. And the banks are a totally weird situation because with banks, they get a lot of attention, but they actually fund very, very few young companies. But it's not their fault. You have to think about the way bank lending works and how shareholders want banks to lend. They want them to lend money against secured assets. And young companies don't have any secured. They have nothing to secure it against. And the joke in the industry is you can get all the bank funding you want to start as long as you need it. And then the last piece is venture capitalists. They get the lion's share of the attention, which in some ways is warranted. You know, your Googles and Apples and FedExes and many others all have venture capital money inside of them. But the reality is, and this is from Kaufman research, less than 20% of the fastest growing companies in the United States took any venture money. And that's not because the VCs wouldn't give it to them. It's because they didn't want it or didn't need it, because they had all those other sources. I don't need money, and I certainly don't need money on these terms. Because, you know, venture capitalists, unlike banks, they don't lend against secured assets. They give you money in exchange for shares. So they take some of your company away. So my answer is if you don't need it, definitely don't get it. There's no question the venture industry has become staid. The irony is it's intended to fund disruption, and yet it's an industry that had become complacent. And interestingly, over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen the emergence of other mechanisms for funding, like AngelList, like these kinds of peer-to-peer funding sources, as people increasingly provide capital in smaller amounts, but more people doing it directly. Having said all of that, though, venture capitalists are hugely important for those young companies that don't have access to bank money, but are growth companies. They have the prospect of being a $5 million or a $10 million company in a couple of years, and they need that growth capital to get there quickly. So it's a race. And the way you play the race is by getting money from people like venture capitalists who give you the money so you can compete with other people who are racing as fast as you are. If you can run a company off cash flow and some combination of credit card, your own savings, and friends and family, you know, Bob's your uncle. Run. You know, keep all the equity because, you know, there's no better thing than being in full control of your own destiny.
Okay. So I like to start with that just because I think sometimes it's not going to be that, hey, we're not going to, you know, there's no options for money. And that's obviously the SBA. We have lots of programs, but I like to just kind of clear the air and let people kind of realize, hey, this is kind of where the money works. Obviously, there's lots of startups and lots of businesses that never need money. But being on the consulting side of things, a lot of times people think, oh, I don't need my own money, right? Or, oh, I can just go get a business loan. And so it's good to show the kind of what the research shows is most people do for their startup money. It's usually a combination of both, but it kind of goes in that order as research shows. So I always tell people, you know, if you're going to start a business, you definitely need your own money. Sometimes you need other people's money. So we'll talk about those different options. But often I've talked to people that kind of think they can start with only other people's money. So you got to get that skin in the game. And, you know, we can do a combination of different types of funding to get things going for you. And just a little background, it made me laugh the very first time I saw that video, and then I read the research behind it, because when I started my first company, it was a retail store, and I literally kind of did that same step, right? My funding, credit cards, I was naive, so I'm sure I'll talk about that a couple times, where I was like, oh, I'll be able to pay these credit cards off soon, before the 0%. It's all about kind of timing. And then I went to friends and family, right? So it is kind of interesting. In the businesses I've talked to, they kind of do that progression a lot. Lots of them don't go to that venture capital ever, but kind of that personal, friends, family, maybe some credit card, which is super risky. And I would definitely recommend doing a business loan before that. But yeah, keep in mind all the different ways that you can use, and we can do combinations of different things to get you the money that you need to get started. So I did want to kind of just point out the difference between debt and equity. So if you guys are kind of new to the lending thing and you don't really understand how it works, debt is that bank lender, a microloan, any type of interest, you know, you're paying back with interest, that kind of falls under the debt, where the equity does involve, hey, I'm going to go get some investors, but in return, I'm giving you part of that, part of my company. So debt is the cheapest way to grow. And a lot of times people will choose to grow with equity and to grow with partners, not just for the money, but also for the expertise. So if you're going to go that equity route, obviously there's a lot more that you're going to want to look at besides just, hey, what's the money they can get me? Because there are relationships that can be built with really good partners that can offer you a lot more than just money, you know, through their connections, things like that. They're, like I said, their expertise. So, but the debt's nice because usually it's going to be cheaper. You're going to keep complete control of your money. And like I said, it is that cheapest way that's going to help you be able to grow your company. Okay, so there are a couple steps when you're trying to prepare to raise debt or equity capital. They're a little bit different. So you're going to need either way, you're going to need to decide precisely how much money you need. Often I've seen people, and I'm sure Doug's seen this, and lots of our lenders, where they might start out and it's more generalized. Like, this is about what I need, you know. So we really encourage you to itemize the items you're going to be needing for financing, itemize, you know, how much working capital you're going to need for your business, but come up with a really, really accurate number, or as accurate as you can. And then once you look at your business and decide what you want to do, that's when you're going to decide, okay, what makes the most sense? What type of funding? And then work on a strategy, right? To kind of present yourself and present your needs. So obviously, if you're going for friends and family, that's going to be a different type of pitch and preparation than if you're going for a bank. If you're going for an investor, that would also be different. So you want to kind of decide, this is how much money I need, and kind of come up with a plan, you know, a strategic plan to try to tackle that need. Okay, so here's the different types of funds. Obviously, your personal funds, your commercial loans. There are SBA-backed commercial loans as well as other type of business loans. So those are both an option. Then you've got the crowdfunding, the microloans, angel investors, private offerings, venture capital, private equity, and public offerings. So the ones on the right, we aren't going to spend a ton of time on any of those, really. We're going to focus more on the options that I assume most of you will need, which is kind of like the more traditional funds. But I did want to kind of bring up those options, that there are different companies that do go out and they do get that non-traditional types of funding. Okay. So you can get money obviously from your cash savings, bootstrapping, which we'll talk about in case you haven't known, friends and family, home equity. There'll be a lot of companies that will try to go get, you know, a little bit of their collateral towards their business. They'll pull a home equity loan, credit cards, like we said, retirement accounts. I've known companies that pulled their whole 401k. That's really scary, right? Because you have a huge fee associated with that. So it's better to kind of go through those proper steps when you can, develop a business plan, and get, you know, we don't want you to get penalized on money that you've saved and put that at risk. So, but those are just, if you're looking at the research, talking to other business owners, these are different avenues that people do use to kind of get their business up and running. So bootstrapping, I think it's a huge aspect that you should look into when you're getting things started. Money can go really, really fast when you have to start your whole venture from scratch. So I would suggest, you know, KSL is a great aspect in Utah. You can find retail things, used desks, anything that you can, if you can make do. Obviously leasing equipment instead of buying. And then also there are different funding options that will kind of incorporate those aspects. But really, you want to ask yourself questions like, hey, do I need to buy this equipment now, or could I rent it for the couple jobs I have? So say you're in construction and there's a couple jobs you might get, you know, once or twice a year. Well, obviously, do you want that piece of equipment? Do you want your capital to go to owning that piece of equipment? Or should we rent certain things that we can for smaller jobs or one-off jobs? And where can I put my capital that's going to help me out more now? So lots of different options. Vendor financing is obviously great too. A lot of vendors that you may come in contact with. When I was in retail, right, I could negotiate up to 6 months term. That was a little bit harder to do. Average was more 90 days. But if you can work your cash flow, to have that vendor financing be for your benefit, that's also another great way to kind of calculate how much money you're going to need to get things going. Okay, when you're going for debt financing or you're going to the bank or the microloan, anything like that, any type of funding, they are going to look at what we call 5 C's. So that's going to be obviously your credit score, collateral, what are you bringing to the table, your commitment, your character, and your cash flow. So it's interesting, a lot of people, when I talk to them and label these 5 C's, they're like, character, that's the same thing as your credit score. Well, no, when you're going for a business loan, they're also going to look at kind of like your resume, right? And your character. Do you have the capabilities to actually run this business like you say you are, right? So there's a lot of things that they look at. Okay, so here's the things you're going to need when you go for if you're going to a bank to get a loan. So you're going to need to get a business plan put together. We can talk a teeny bit about that. I know we've worked, James and I have been talking about doing some other webinars where we'll actually deep dive more into the business plan, but that's super, super important. It's the roadmap for your business. If you haven't done that, a bank's not even going to look at you. So it's definitely something you have to put together. Collateral, what's going to hold some of that loan? Yes, obviously the SBA guarantees part of that loan, but banks are going to want to see collateral. They're going to want to see an injection, meaning what are you putting? Like what's the cash you are bringing to the table? So like I said earlier, I'll talk to people, or I've talked to people in the past where they just want like 100% financing, for their business idea. And I have a business plan and it's really solid. Well, you got to think about it from the bank's perspective, right? Like you want them to take on all this risk, but you're not willing to put up any of your personal, your personal funds, wherever you're gaining those, right? Whether it's savings, whether it's a home equity, whatever percentage, you've got to put something in the some kind of risk there, right? Put some skin in the game. Obviously, you're going to need a good credit score, financial projections. That's important. They want to see where they're going. That's kind of that C, that cash flow C. They want to see that they're able to, they're going to be able to get paid as well. Personal tax returns. If your business is, has been long enough that if it's been open long enough and has a good enough financial health, you could probably slide on the personal tax return. But a lot of times the businesses that I'm working with, a lot goes on that personal liability. You're kind of back in the loan. I tell people to think of it as co-signing in a way, right? Like we want the business to be linked to this loan, but they're going to look at you personally as well. So, and then any personal or business info you have. And when we're talking about these, you have to keep in mind that all lenders, like the SBA is pretty standard in what they require for their loans, but different lenders that you work with might have little tweaks of what they want to see. But for the most part, that's pretty typical. Okay. So main reasons loans aren't approved. So if you have a poor credit history, if you have too much previous debt, when your business is really, really new, a lot of times that's super hard to get a loan. And that's also super frustrating for business loans. That's why we've kind of, Doug's here to talk about the microloan after, because that's great. They're an organization, or there's different organizations that are more mission focused, where they want to make sure those that are having a hard time getting a risk, whether it be the historicals from the start, because they're a startup or things like that might make it too risky for a traditional bank, they kind of pick up, and that's their mission focus. But yeah, so your industry might be perceived as too risky, or you might also go to a bank where just in their portfolio, they have too many of your type of business. And so for their portfolio, it's kind of risky to bring on another type of that business. So keep in mind, one no from a lender may not be a no from a different lender. Okay, your cash flow is not strong enough. That can be looked at through historicals or through those projections that you're talking about. And then an incomplete application or paperwork. So just make sure you kind of get your ducks in a row. When we talk about business plans or application, our resource partners at the Small Business Development Center, they actually will help you, or the Women's Business Center, they'll actually help you kind of walk through these processes, get a business plan together. So when you get to the bank, hopefully it's kind of more wrapped up nice in a bow, and we're not missing anything. I threw up this slide just because a lot of people don't realize that we, the SBA, are not the person who's giving you money directly. So you're usually going to choose the lending partner of your choice to get a loan, and we are going to guarantee or back that loan. So you're not really coming to our Salt Lake offices and saying, hey, I need some money. Here's my business plan. You're going to go to your bank or a smaller, like a different funding option. So a lot of times it's great to start if you've already got a business set up, to go directly to your lender and communicate with them and see what they say, because you already have that relationship. I tell businesses a lot of times, hey, I know virtual and online banking make things really, really simple, but you should occasionally put your face in the bank, because that kind of builds that rapport while you're in business. And I will share these slides, obviously. Sometimes government slides, if you didn't know, have lots of words on it. Usually I don't like that many, but I keep them there so we can share them too, and you can keep this information for you. Okay, so the SBA loan programs there's a variety of programs. We can go anywhere from $500 to over $5 million. They can also be used for working capital. I know a lot of times people think, oh, I can't pull money unless it's going away, like it's assigned to something directly. Well, assigning it to working capital for while you're getting up and going, or if you're taking on a big project that you aren't going to get paid for a while, but you're going to need those funds to maybe pay employees, pay yourself, pay for the resources needed for that job. That the SBA does loans like that all the time for working capital. And then we have larger loans for fixed assets. So your real estate, your bigger equipment, those type of loans we can put on a longer term, and usually part of it's a little bit of a lower interest rate. So trying to make it so we try to make it the best for business owners as we can. And we know that those fixed assets can be really, really expensive. So we like to extend those terms so you have a lower payment. Okay, then we have SBA loan programs for underserved markets. We have the Community Advantage program. That can actually go up to $250,000. A lot of times I see those loans kind of in the smaller, almost micro loan category as well. But it's really focused on, we've got your minorities, your women, your veterans, rural. Usually there's a lot of other little segments that can be classified as underserved as well. With this, they're meant to take on more risk, just like the microloan. They're administered by nonprofit lenders. So that's why I said earlier, they're kind of mission driven instead of just, hey, I'm a traditional lender, I'm here to make money. And with that, they have a little bit more flexibility. So I'll let Doug speak more directly on the microloan when we get there. The Community Advantage is also an option. There's training involved with both of them to really help you kind of get to where you need. Okay, so other SBA loan programs, the 7A is kind of our keystone program. I guess it's the most used program. That can go up to $5 million. We also have an express program that's part of the SBA 7A. It's just a lot smaller. Then the 504 is that real estate and long-term used equipment. So that one, usually we have a 504 certified partner as well as your traditional lender. So if you have that relationship already built with your bank, a lot of times we just partner them with a 504 certified lender, and it's kind of a team effort to get you a 504 loan. Okay, just so you're aware of the different loan eligibility requirements for SBA loans. Obviously, it has to meet the size standard that is small. It's classified as small. If you are unaware, though, that is very, very large. So a lot of, most times we're not going to you're going to be fine, especially I think all the people on this call, or when you're working with a small business development center, that size standard is set usually pretty big. I don't have an exact number because it does vary depending on what your industry is in. but it's pretty big. The lender, and we're talking, I'm trying to remember the number off the top of my head, but it's usually if you're under about 900 employees, I think you're good. But like I said, it does vary within industry. NACS codes, if you've heard of NACS codes, it's just kind of how the government classifies different industries. So certain industries might still be considered small, even if they make, you know, $20-30 million a year. So that's why I don't have that exact number. But like I said, so you just make sure you meet that small size standard. Your lenders are really going to have their own requirements, probably more so than we do. It's kind of, ours are a lot more simple, meaning you got to be for profit. Are you doing business in the US? Have you invested some? Because if you're not investing, like I said, then other people aren't going to take on that risk. When we're talking about exhausting other financial options, this is a thing for like microloans or community advantage. There's also different revolving loan funds in the counties. So a lot of those options, they really require you to get a no from a bank before you can use their options. We get asked different questions all the time. What isn't allowed for SBA financing? In the last couple of years, the cannabis industry, that's been really kind of a hot topic. If you're in that industry, since it's federally still considered illegal, doesn't matter where you live, the SBA is a federal program. So that's not gonna, you know, we can't fund things like that. We can't fund like nonprofits or religious organizations. Multi-level marketing, real estate investment. And you're going to say, wait, you talked about, you know, being able to get real estate loans. Well, the 504 is kind of different, and there are requirements of how much space you occupy. So say maybe you're on a strip mall, and if you occupy most of the space, you actually can carry a few, but there's the 504 is more meant for your business real estate, not real estate investments. And you're not gonna be able to take the money and, you know, go gamble with it, or you do it for a gambling type of industry. Okay, so in the formal business plan, like I said, in the future, we'll go deeper with the Black Chamber. We'll talk about, you know, more of the ins and outs, but this is kind of what's in a formal business plan. So you're gonna have your concept, what's really going on in the industry, a market analysis, economics of the business, your marketing strategy, operations, who's on your management team. On the management team, it can be formal and informal, so it can be in-house people. I've also seen, you know, here's my group of, you know, consultants or different things, people that I outsource. You know, they don't have to be necessarily W-2 type employees on your management team. Risk assumptions and assumptions. I always let people know, if you don't put your risk, like if you don't have a good SWOT analysis in there, which is talking about the strengths and weaknesses, the different opportunities and threats. So those kind of internal and external factors. But if you don't list your risks, that's going to be a red flag for people, because everybody has risks, right? It's really good to address the different risks, or maybe your areas where you're a little weaker, and then just kind of talk about how you're going to combat that and how you're going to come up with a strategy or a plan or get the support you need in those areas. Also get a timeline. Financial projections are really, really important. And then how are you going to use those funds, right? The part of funds how much are you contributing, and then how you're going to use the funds that you're asking for. So like I said, this can be really overwhelming. The SBA has great resources with the Small Business Development Center, Women's Business Center. SCORE is also one of our resource partners, and I really love their financial projection template because it helps really break things down. Don't think you're alone in any of this, okay? So even if you're like, hey, I don't have a connection with any of those people you remembered, of those acronyms, I will share my email in the chat so you can reach out, and I can get you some templates, as well as, you know, do some email introductions to people where you can get some free, you know, free business consulting that will really help you get this business plan put together. So you can go to the bank and try to get some money. So here is the financial statements you'll need. You'll definitely need your balance sheet, which is just, you know, your assets and your liabilities, make sure things are balanced. You're going to need your income statement, and then also a cash flow statement. So your cash flow statement might only be projections. These things you might not have historicals if you're just starting up. So projections are really, really important as well. That's also why I like that score template, and I'll grab a link and share that in the chat as well, because it's an Excel sheet that kind of has all those formulas built in. So as you're putting in those common, like, here's my revenue projections, here's my operating expenses, it'll actually help you develop these 3 different financial sheets that people or lenders are going to expect to see. I get a lot of questions too on, well, if I'm starting out, what do I need to show? And then if it's writing all personal, or even if you're kind of doing a co-sign thing, even it's not really, you're not really co-signing, but they're going to look, if your business isn't well established and it can't hold its own, it's going to be looking at your financials as well as any business financials you have or projections you have. Okay. Let's see. So here's some links. Like I told you, the SBA score, Women's Business Center. We have one in Salt Lake as well as in Cedar City. They're really great at sitting down and making sure your business plan looks really, really good. They'll give you suggestions if you need to tweak anything before you take it to a lender. And then the Small Business Development Centers too. And they have about, I know we just lost Moab, but I think we're about 12 different ones in the whole state, and they're awesome to sit down and walk you through creating that business plan. The market research they can get for you too is really, really in depth. They have access to, and I say we or they sometimes because they're a resource partner, and they're able to provide that free consulting because the SBA does fund them, but they're able to have licenses with programs like IBIS World and things like that, where they can pull market research for your specific industry to help you build that business plan. They can also do more in-depth localized research as well in that market research, which could help you with, hey, this is a good market, this is what the demographics look, or this location a mile east may be a little better, things like that. A lot of people have a misconception too. I'm kind of at the end. I missed a couple slides. I took a couple slides out because I wanted to make sure we had good time for Doug. A lot of people have a misconception that they're not personally liable for their loan if they have an LLC. And I like to clear it up that obviously if you're getting a business loan, you're kind of putting your name out there on that line. The LLC is going to protect you more when you're, say someone trips and falls at your business, or they try to sue you, they're kind of suing the business more so. But most documents, you're really going to be held liable for these finances if you take out a loan. So they're looking at you as well as your business. Key takeaways: plan for future growth. Like I said, when I did my business, I did a lot with credit cards on my first one. I actually was in the green before those were ever come due, but at the same time, I'm constantly growing my business, right? And when I was young and naive, I didn't realize, hey, not only do I need enough to get started, how much of the money that I make once I'm in the green is going to go to actually paying off that debt, or is it going to go into continuing to grow that? So you want to make sure you're planning on that growth. Like I said, knowing debt and equity, and I didn't go a ton into those equity type options, which are those non-traditional options, but I have some great connections. If you do have a business that are looking at like, hey, I want to learn more about venture, right? I could connect you with venturecapital.org, or SBDC in Salt Lake County is really great at crowdfunding, and they do different things because some of their counselors have actually successfully crowdfunded. So we can connect you with them. But it's important that you realize, hey, equity means I'm giving part of my business away, where debt is the cheapest way to go. And I'm just, I'm doing it off interest. And then just really understanding, you really need to break down exactly the type of money you need and have it kind of line item. Don't have like a guesstimate of how much you're going to need. Because even your line item, if you break it down, you probably are going to end up needing more than you thought you'd need, right? That's kind of how life works. And there are, like I said, lots of different SBA programs. There's other programs as well. So lenders also have private, even the Utah Microloan Fund, they have SBA backed stuff. Doug, correct me if I'm wrong. And then you also have other programs, right? So we're not the only way you can get money. And I wanted to be kind of clear about that, is there are other options out there as well. But glad to be a resource. Is there any questions for me? I kind of sped through, and like I said, last minute, I took a couple slides off because I knew, Doug's our go-to for those microloans. And I know a lot of people just need that little bit of money to get going. So I kind of wanted to do a clear picture of kind of what's required with the SBA, that process, and then, give him time. But any questions about any of our specific programs or our resource partners or the process?
Yeah, let's go ahead and give time over to Doug, and then we'll do questions at the end. I'm certain there may be some. There was great information to share, Jack. I appreciate that so much, because there's still information that I learned there, all the different resources or funding options that are available to small businesses. Not many people think that there are that many options that are available. And I like what you said about financing is the cheapest way to go, because there's always some skin in the game that you have to put in order to get the funding you need. And yes, many of our businesses do bootstrap their way through, and I like that you let people know that's okay. Try to bootstrap this business the best way you can, but when it comes down to it and you're ready to expand, here are the options to continue. So right now, I'll just turn it over to you, Doug, and kind of share a little bit about the Utah Microloan Fund, what a CDFI is, and who is best for this type of financing.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, you did me a big favor, is you've got all the props. So, and I like the background too. Let me first tell you a bit about me and about our fund, but then what I also want to do is I want to talk about another set of lenders that are available to small businesses that are kind of in between the banks and the credit card somewhere, and we fit in that general category. But first of all, who I am is so my name is Doug Keefe. I joined the fund, the Utah Microloan Fund, as its executive director in early April of this past year. Before that, I ran a company called Summit Financial Resources based in Salt Lake City, but it was a national commercial, what they call a commercial finance company. And what we did was we did essentially collateral loans under the guise of accounts receivable and inventory financing, and that's a whole category of lenders that I'll get to in a second. But they're alternatives. They'd be an alternative lender to banks and lend into riskier situations than banks. So I ran that for about 15 years, and that got me used to small business lending, riskier small business lending. And then after we sold that, I found and they found me, the Microloan Fund. But what I've discovered with the fund is that it presents a very unique option for people. That's probably the most flexible option of any offering in Utah. And let me get into that. Okay, so what the Utah Microloan Fund is, it's a not-for-profit organization that's been around for 30 years. It's supported by the banks and the SBA. Supported meaning we get investment and loan money from institutions, and then we lend it out to small businesses within a not-for-profit framework. Why that's important to say it's not-for-profit is because it doesn't have a profit objective. Without a profit objective, it can charge as low rates as possible and have tolerance for credit loss also. So what that allows us to do is to lend fairly aggressively to situations that there are businesses that can't get capital from really anywhere else. So it's a very unique option, a very good option for particularly startup businesses, pre-startup with under a year or under even under 2 years old. Because institutional lenders that are banks or even alternative finance companies tend to have certain criteria that don't extend to young businesses. And I'll get to that in a second too. But let me finish up on the Microloan Fund. So we're based in Salt Lake City. We're a relatively small organization, but with a high objective to grow. And so my objective running it and with the banks supporting and the SBA supporting is to grow throughout Utah. So I'm meant to lend money to all places, rural in Utah, all industries in Utah. I'd say we roughly follow the list that Jackie published that are SBA no-nos to lend to, but I probably might find a way to privately lend into even some of those, but staying away from legal businesses, which nobody will do. What the fund does, that does term loans, 3 to 7 year term loans, and it for almost any business purpose except for real estate. We don't lend directly on real estate, but almost any other business purpose, which could be working capital, could be equipment needs, almost anything. But they are term loans. And so that's essentially what we do. As Jackie pointed out in her slide, we're part of the crowd that's mission based. So part of our mission is to lend to underserved businesses. Underserved, what I call underserved, would be it really 3 general categories: lower middle income owners, which means owners without that are below sort of the averages of income in Utah, plus not significant wealth personally, but also minority and women-owned businesses. So our mission is to be a majority of our lending goes to what I would say underserved demographics of owners. And those tend to be the most underserved in terms of access to capital. So it sort of starts with, if you can't get to a bank or you can't get to other forms of efficient capital, then you come to us. And our mission is to lend as much as possible into those populations. The other thing is, and I'll ring this with other types of mission-based objective, but if you can get to a bank and you can lend, or you can get the cheaper financing, like through your owner's personal home equity line on their house, for instance, which is, by the way, a very, very popular form of financing these days because of Utah real estate prices going up so fast. So to the extent that you can do that, and along with the bootstrapping and any other source of capital that aren't high price capital, you should do it, and we'll encourage that. So we also have to essentially check to make sure you've exhausted that before coming to us. That's part of the mission, and we're meant to be bank friendly. So as we work with the businesses, we're meant to pass them back to banks if we can, because that's where ideally you'd like to be with the cheapest form of capital. So that's another piece of the mission. Then the other one I want to mention is, which is somewhat unique to the not-for-profit industry, are partnerships with, I'll say, organizations that train, mentor, and help. In the private world in lending, that's not as much of a priority, but in the mission-based not-for-profit world, it is. So we actively partner with SBDC, with SCORE, with Women's Business Center, pretty much any governmental, quasi-governmental, or not-for-profit organization that wants to help the small business, and in many cases provides free service being consulting and other types of support. So the idea is that we provide the loan money and then pair that with grant money and free service. And all of a sudden, if you can put that together in one package, that's really attractive to a small business here in Utah, and hopefully do it economically or free. So that's sort of a general overview of the microloan fund. And the last thing I would mention is our intention is to grow to and offer to larger sizes, larger loan commitments. Historically, we've, as a fund, have offered up to $50,000 and loan commitment. I've actually got approval to, and I'm working on a structure and a capitalization to allow us to eventually get to 250,000. The main reason, or the purpose of that in our objectives, are to be able to help a business through its life cycle to get all the way to a bank. As I mentioned before, banks tend to like operating history, and most would require a business to be in business for at least 2 years, often longer, along with the criteria that Jackie went through, which is essentially strong collateral, strong cash flow, strong personal guarantor, credit history, other things, but also time of business. So this would allow us to possibly help the business all the way until we can get it back to the bank. And so, because businesses, as they grow and they're more successful, have evolving capital needs, that still require money beyond just self-sustained or self-generating cash flow. So that's an expansion of our business model that's to come. But I just want to mention that because we're trying to serve more of the need, and my view, the need goes up to $250,000 here in Utah. So because there aren't enough programs that are targeted to it. So that's an overview of myself and an overview of the fund. But let me then just jump into to a broader subject, because as Jackie was going through it, I just wanted to make sure I touched upon sort of a type of lender that's also available to small businesses. And let me just call them in the broad category of alternative lenders, because there's a fairly robust industry of private, and in our case, not for profit, but mostly private alternative lenders that just focus on different industries and focus on and have different focuses that are still non-bankable credits. I mentioned previously I ran a company that was it's a commercial finance company that happens to focus on financing receivables and inventory. Well, that's a popular form of financing in Utah and also nationally for companies that some of you might be in their category. And that would be, somebody that's perhaps been in business for a few years, has growth requirements that are beyond what a bank's comfortable with, has a customer base, so therefore generates receivables, but receivables may not pay very fast. So often a small company gets reliant on a large customer that might stretch them out for 90, 120 days, 150 days. So that creates a working capital need that's essentially floating the amounts due to them. So there's a whole industry that goes after that, and that's factoring companies. Very legitimate form of financing, but it tends to be a costly financing. But it's relatively efficient the way it works, because you can get your money right away rather than waiting for a customer to pay you. And that's an example. There's other examples within inventory. There are inventory finance companies. Essentially, you have to buy a lot of inventory up front, and it sells out over time. There's a myriad of equipment lenders that are specific to particular types of equipment. So that's another form of lending, that there are companies that specifically finance equipment. And then there's a category of lender that's legitimate. It's not my favorite kind of lending, but I'll call them online lenders or merchant cash advance providers. They came on the scene maybe 10 years ago or so, and they tend to cater to people who need fast money. So they're sort of I'll call them the kind of the commercial version of credit card that go a little larger, but watch out for the cost of those. But they do provide money quickly, and they provide it without having to provide a whole lot of paperwork. So they serve a purpose, and that's been a popular form of financing too. So I just want to mention there is an industry of lenders out there that do accommodate the company that's somewhere between self-financing, bootstrapping, and a bank that's beyond just us, or Jackie mentioned the revolving loan funds too. So there is an industry of those, so you should at least investigate this. But back to us. I would look at us as being Utah-based. So we're very devoted to Utah. So you can sort of touch and feel us, and you can and we'll interact with you actively. We are meant to lend money to those who can't get it anywhere else, and we don't dilute your equity. So we're a loan, we're not equity. We are much more reasonably, we're north of a bank, but we're much more reasonably priced than other alternative lenders that do risky lending or in risky situations, because we're not for profit, and that's our mission to be that. And then lastly, we have a very large set of bank partners. SBA is our partner, not-for-profit partners. So we tend to be somewhat of a central spot to connect to a lot of these places. So if it turns out you get to a point that it makes sense to go to a bank, we have relationships. It makes sense to get services or support from others like the Small Business Development Centers, who we view as very important to the equation, and other not-for-profits that help, or even the SBA. Jackie, just to answer your question, I think on what type of SBA lender, we're at least right now, and likely others will join. We're essentially the only Utah-based microloan lender that's certified under the SBA's microloan program. That makes us a bit different because what happens is the SBA lends directly to us, and then we lend out, but we retain the risk in our organization. So it's not designed like a lot of other SBA programs that are guarantee programs. So it allows us to I think get a little more aggressive in the risk taking because we retain the risk here. And it's a good program. It's a great program because we get economical loans from the SBA, and it's a good partnership. And then so coming to us allows for connecting with the SBA, connecting with larger or lenders that will go upstream, and also partners that help in the service side of the businesses. So we're a good sort of central spot for that. And then the last thing I would say is we're going to expand the support of our organization. We're expanding our sort of our partnerships and our capital support to non-banks. We're talking to private foundations in Utah. Other non-bank credit unions are starting to become more involved with us, and so in order to be able to sort of be that place for the small, riskier loan, with particularly aimed at startups and underserved businesses that just aren't covered well enough in Utah, and probably not covered well enough nationally. So there's a real desire for us to really expand our scope and really lend a lot more money. So that's I think I hit most of the points that I was trying to hit. So James, with that, is that okay?
That was great, Doug. I appreciate it so
Okay.
much. And assisting people learn more about the Utah Microloan Fund and the alternative lending options that are available. At this time, we just have a few minutes left here for any Q&A. So if anybody has some questions for Doug, Jackie, or even myself regarding the topic of funding for your small business, now it's time to post them in the Q&A option or in the chat at this time. And like I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. Jackie was grateful enough to say that she'll share the slide deck. And for those of you that are members of the Black Chamber, we'll upload that into our resources function, resources area. So when you log into your account, you'll be able to see the slide deck there. And we appreciate our SAM agreement with the Utah with the Small Business Administration and Microloan Fund as a member of the Utah Black Chamber. And also we have Sarah Day and others that participate in our business development committee. So we appreciate your guys' input as we try to work to share with others the resources that are available for our small Black and minority-owned businesses. A question that I have, Doug, what's the smallest loan that you guys will do for Utah Microloan Fund?
I would tell you that I prefer to stay above $5,000 on the loans. Okay. I've gone smaller, but I just think there are better options below 5. But that's not published anywhere. But I'm more likely to, if somebody comes in and needs less than 5, I'll probably offer 5, and then just they can borrow as they need.
Excellent. Great. It's like we're not getting too many questions. That means you guys shared everything that they were looking for. People may be too scared to say anything or put in the Q&A or in the chat. But that's great. Just so for events coming up with the Utah Black Chamber going forward, we do plan on having at least 2 webinars a month. We had one scheduled for tomorrow regarding data privacy, but we're moving that to March 10th due to the demand of Black History Month and all the events going around. But we felt this one was important enough that we had to get this one in for this month and load it to our YouTube channel for people to continually view. And I'm pretty sure that this will probably get the most views, because the #1 question for most businesses is, how do I get money for my business? So we look forward to more of our webinars happening throughout the month of March and going forward. And as we continue to go for the Black History Month, check our Black History Month calendar for events that will be coming. There's another question come up to the chat. What is the lowest interest rate for a startup company? And I guess this could be a more general question for the SBA or Microloan Fund. But as far as the cheapest money you can get, what have you seen? And that's the question I pose to either you, Doug, or Jackie.
Well, I'll just start. It's our rates range from prime plus 4% to prime plus 9%, which puts it at 7% to 12% plus. Startups would tend to be, it's dependent on, I mean, not all startups are created equal, but we do finance mostly startups. So it's going to be dependent on the profile of the startup and also the size of the one. But I would say you're probably facing 9 to 10% plus for that one.
Yeah, obviously, Doug, you hit it spot on. You're the one that's the lender.
Yeah, I'm probably the most active lender,
especially
to start,
for especially for that startup phase, which is will be sometimes a little bit higher than an established.
Right.
What is the gap between a startup and a non-startup company as far as so what will be the difference as far as rate wise?
There's no magic to it, James. It's because startups could have like strong personal support, could have, I mean, there's just a whole bunch of mirrors to it, but you can almost say it's any business less than 2 years old, because that 2-year-old, the two-year requirement seems to be somewhat consistent with banks and even collateral lenders. So collateral lenders like to see some history. So you could be pre-startup, startup, or somebody that's growing over the first couple of years, and they sort of get grouped together because they don't have a lot of history and probably don't have the strength of cash flow at that point. So it's just a judgment of what you don't know, because why do you like history? You like to have somebody have proven something, right? So more of the bet of the lending decision or even the investment decision once you get the equity providers is going to be on the come. There's going to be a large reliance on a business plan or a cash flow forecast, for instance, and it's going to be a bet, right? So it just makes the bet more significant if the younger the company is. So there is a gap in rate, but it's a judgmental gap. That's dependent on a bunch of factors. So generally higher rate for the startup or for the one that the business is just getting going.
Great. Thanks for sharing that.
Probably didn't answer your question all the way, but it's somewhat of a art, not a science.
It's so different between each lender, right? Because they're going to look at those risk factors differently based upon their where they stand and their portfolio and.
Yeah, I would just tell you that one of the things that interests me about this business is it's not affixed to any particular factor. If lenders care about collateral, care about history, care about cash flow, care about personal or wealth of the owner or any kind of guarantor, you can pretty much guarantee we're not strong in any of them. With the businesses we see, at least not strong enough for a bank or another institutional lender. So it's always going to be that mix and match of what, trying to pull it together in a credit decision, and then a high reliance on the common, a business plan and a cash flow forecast. So back to the point of, if you can get help, if a business starting up can get help to put their business plan together and to get discipline and forecasting and get discipline on how to administer their business and get taught on all the basics of running a business that range from accounting to finance to IT to marketing to other things, because that doesn't tend to be the priority of a startup business. But if they get help with that, that all helps the credit decision.
Great.
Because a lender like us will see that, and they'll know that they're not in it alone, and it's gonna favorably impact the credit decision.
Great. Well, we are over time now. I know there was one last question in here, and if there's a quick answer for you guys, does it matter if the company is a consulting company for funding qualification?
You mean, can it be providing services, consulting services?
Well, if the company is a consulting company, is it
So-
eligible? Is it available to get funding?
Yes, it can.
Great. All right.
At least with me, Jackie. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't hit any of my not eligible. And I guess it depends on what you're consulting, because you look at that list.
Nothing on the list. Right.
As long as it doesn't consult anything on the not eligible list, you'll be fine.
Yeah, on the bad list.
All right. Doug, Jackie, thank you so much for your time this afternoon and sharing your experience, knowledge, and your organizations and how to support funding options for small businesses. Like I mentioned, we'll be uploading in this recording so people can watch it later, and we'll post that to our websites and all of our channels so people can access it. And just look to our Black Chamber calendar on utahblackchamber.com for more information. That would be coming up on our future events. And with that, I bid y'all adieu and have a good rest of your day.
James, can I just mention that you probably have marketing materials for us that are offered through the chamber. Sarah would have provided those too. So if she hasn't, I'll make sure she does. So your members can access us essentially through that.
Great. Yeah, we would appreciate that.
Okay.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.